How do we turn it?
Hindi pa. Kaya na, baka hindi niya na ma-unmute.
Miss Universe 2018 and NCCA Arts Ambassador. My love for Philippine culture and the arts was not something that I was born with due to my mixed heritage. It was something that was grown, learned, and embodied. And I have fervent hope that we can continue to instill love and passion for Philippine arts and culture in each of us, especially among the second and third generation of Filipinos who are physically distant from their roots. For this, I would like to invite everyone to get to know more about our rich heritage through Sentro Rizal, our cultural centers dedicated for the global promotion of Philippine culture, arts, and languages. To date, we have 35 centers across the globe. Visit the NCCA website and Sentro Rizal Instagram to know more about their activities. Sentro Rizal, Sentro ng Filipino. Tuloy pa kayo!
True or false? The Philippines was discovered by Ferdinand Magellan in 1521. Answer: false. The Philippines was not discovered by Magellan. Groups of pre-Hispanic indigenous peoples had settled various parts of the country, and indigenous cultures had already been flourishing well before the 15th century. Indigenous women spent hours thinking up complex and meaningful textile patterns. The Mangyan were already creating ambahan or poetry, usually etched on bamboo. The Kankanae buried their dead in hanging coffins to bring them closer to the sky or God. This was the rich tapestry that, in a series of colonizations, Spain and America would dramatically change. Filipinos rallied against these powers, drawing upon a blossoming sense of nation. Like its iconic dessert halo-halo, Filipino identity is not just one thing, but a fascinating union of traditions, cultures, and influences. For Filipinos abroad hungry to know more about their roots and identity, Sentro Rizal is the best place to start. Often located in Philippine embassies, Sentro Rizal is the Philippines Cultural Center abroad. There are over 30 sites of Sentro Rizal across the world. Sentro Rizal offers a treasure trove of Filipiniana and holds activities that celebrate Philippine culture. It has training courses for volunteer teachers and lessons and books on rules and writing and spelling in the Filipino language. Sentro Rizal also has books and multimedia materials about Filipino culture and arts. Learn more about the People Power Revolution, a model of nonviolent regime change that other nations have emulated, or how Filipinos used egg whites mixed with lime as mortar for large stone blocks to build massive churches. Sentro Rizal also organizes cultural and educational activities such as lectures, film showings, exhibits, performances, food festivals, and workshops. Sentro Rizal's doors are also open to foreigners who are interested to know more about the Philippines, including its trade and tourism opportunities.
You have to have your phone.
The center is named for Philippine hero Dr. Jose Rizal, whose books Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo helped spark the Philippine Revolution against Spain. Rizal lived abroad for many years, but distance only fanned the flame of his love for country. Filipinos, like Rizal, can remain Filipino at heart, even as they make their home in other parts of the world. By keeping alive the
But
tie
the program
Filipinos
starts at
overseas to their culture, Sentro Rizal helps preserve the fabric of Philippine society. Visit Sentro Rizal today to learn more about the Philippines and embrace your Filipino roots.
If you have questions, let me know. And I can get it. Notes.
I tried to listen to one episode on architecture, then I said, "Wag na lang."
Was it the same place?
No, another one.
Okay.
Philippines Heritage Library. But it was, and then, ano, because I got a call, and that was more important.
Yeah.
You know, because my cousin Julia said her husband's sick. He's only 65. He's got Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, 70%, which is, if he falls, it can rupture. It's dangerous. And then the fact that
Welcome and half a day, mabuhay. Good afternoon po. My name is Consul Ferdinand P. Flores and we're live from Sentro Rizal of the Philippine Consulate General in Agana, Guam. Magandang hapon po mula sa amin sa Guam and thank you for joining us in today's celebration. Today we are commemorating the 160th birth anniversary of Dr. Jose P. Rizal. And in partnership with the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, we humbly offer this opportunity to re-immerse the global Filipinos, wherever they may be, in the life and times of Dr. Jose P. Rizal through this virtual lecture sa Hapag Kainan ng Noli Me Tangere at Filibusterismo with renowned Filipino culinary master and mentor, Chef Myrna Segismundo. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. And to officially start the program, we would like to call on our beloved the Honorable Patrick John U. Hilado, the Consul General of the Philippine Consulate General in Guam. Sir.
Thanks to all of you who are joining us today on this Zoom session or are watching our live stream on Facebook. Thank you very much for joining us as we commemorate the 160th anniversary of the birth of our national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal. Through this special virtual lecture we have called sa Hapag Kainan ng Noli Me Tangere at Filibusterismo. We all know that these two novels, the Noli and the Fili, as we popularly call them, are among Rizal's greatest literary works. His writings nourish the revolutionary spirit of our forebears who aspired to take control of our destiny as a people and as a country. More than 130 years after its publication, we think it would be an interesting proposition to look at elements of the Fili and Noli again, and this time, look at it from a unique perspective, this time from the lens of gastronomy. We shine a light on the Filipino culinary specialties featured in the novels, including the tinola, the sinigang, or the secret language of the chocolate or chocolate-a. So today, we are very fortunate and grateful to have with us a wonderful resource person who can take us through this interesting journey. She's not only a renowned Filipino chef, author, and restaurateur, but she's also an expert and a passionate advocate of Filipino cuisine. Maraming salamat po, Chef Myrna, for agreeing to do this lecture. This promises to be an interesting session, so I will not bore you with a long welcome, but let me just end by also saying thank you to the National Commission on Culture and the Arts for co-organizing this lecture with the Consulate General. I hope everyone enjoys our session today. Mabuhay po tayong lahat at isang makabuluhang paggunita sa ika-160 anibersaryo ng kapanganakan ni Dr. Jose P. Rizal. Marami pong salamat.
Thank you, Conjen. And now, of course, we would like to hear from the NCCA. We have a special video message to be delivered by Mr. Bernan Corpus, the designated supervising officer for administration, which he will deliver on behalf of the NCCA chairman, and the Executive Director.
Distinguished guests, participants from our Philippine Foreign Service posts, dearest Filipinos overseas, mga kababayan, ladies and gentlemen, magandang araw po sa ating lahat and mabuhay from the Philippines. On behalf of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, led by our chairman, Arsenio Nick Lizazo, it is my honor to welcome you all to Sentro Rizal Agana's online lecture sa Hapag Kainan ng Noli Me Tangere at Filibusterismo ni Dr. Jose Rizal. This is part of a series of activities in commemoration of the 160th birth anniversary of the Filipino icon and patriot, Dr. Jose Rizal. One of the mandates of Sentro Rizal Filipinas is to formulate and implement programs that safeguard and promote Philippine culture and identity among Filipinos overseas, most especially to migrants and their children. And what better way than to revisit the timeless lessons and genius of the foremost Filipino icon, Dr. Jose Rizal. Rizal, or as fondly called by his family, Pepe, always aspired for the ideal. He wrote unceasingly for the La Solidaridad, the mouthpiece of the propaganda, hoping, as did his fellow propagandists, that the pleas of the Filipinos would be heard by the powers that be. Until he produced the two novels, which ultimately led to his death, the Noli Me Tangere and Filibusterismo. But behind the lore and characterizations which perfectly captured the socio-political setting of that time are the hidden lessons embedded not only in its titular characters, but also in objects and sometimes food. Food, you see, not only reflects our identity, but also our culture. It represents our preferences and lifestyle, as well as our environment, history, and traditions. From the simple sinigang to the infamous tinola, Rizal laced his novels with Filipino culture in the most sumptuous and even controversial ways. Indeed, Rizal is quite the foodie. They say food has a way of bringing people together. Today, we open up conversations not only on Filipino food, but its significance to our lives as envisioned in Rizal's work. May this endeavor also inspire us to reconnect with our Filipino roots and aspire for the ideal. May we look once again at the way Rizal lived his brief life to be inspired to move forward for ourselves and for our nation. Muli, maraming salamat po. Thank you to our partners in Sentro Rizal Agana, most especially to Consul General Patrick John Elado of the Philippine Consulate in Agana, Guam, for organizing such timely and important webinar. Magandang araw po muli sa ating lahat. Mabuhay po kayong lahat at mabuhay ang kulturang Filipino.
Thank you, Mr. Bernan Corpus of the NCCA. And before we go straight to the lecture of our esteemed speaker, Chef Myrna, allow me just to make a rundown of our guests and participants from all over the Philippines and Agana, Guam. So we are joined today by Ms. Loisa Kabuhat, the President of the Filipino-American Presidents Club of Guam, Mr. Emmanuel B. Banwa, President of the United Filipino Association of YAP in the Micronesia, Mr. Carlito J. Marquez, President of the Bicol Association of the Mariana Islands. Mr. Roy Salvador Adonay, Board of Trustees, the Filipino Community of Guam. Ubaldo Bojo Molina Punong Bayan Jr., APE Creative, host of the Bro Show in Guam. Dr. Sam Mabini Yang, former Guam Department of Labor Director. Dr. Clarissa Kwan, Associate Professor of English, University of Guam. Miss Gloria Baginon, Eskwelahang Munti ng Guam volunteer teacher in the Laguna Association, and members of the UP Alumni Guam group. And we are also joined by our family members from all over the Philippines, I see. And we have guests from, of course, my favorite university, the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and our friends from Calamba, Laguna, our friends from the Department of Foreign Affairs in Manila, some Filipino community leaders also from, I think, Palau, Micronesia, and I think Marshall Islands as well. So before we begin our lecture, special lecture for today, I just want to say that it's a very creative event that we have today to revisit Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo from a different perspective, and this is from the food perspective. And then at this point, allow me to officially start the program by introducing our special lecturer, guest speaker, Ms. Chef Myrna Segismundo. So Chef Myrna Segismundo works out of her private kitchen studio called New Manila, where she does consultancy and recipe development. She was a managing director of Restaurant 9501, the exclusive executive dining restaurant of ABS-CBN. And she was also part of the sign of the Anvil restaurant of the former PCI Bank, now Banco de Oro. These multi-awarded corporate dining restaurants specialized in both Filipino and international cuisines. Her professional experiences also include work stints in hotels in the Philippines and overseas, such as Waldorf Astoria Hotel, St. Moritz on the Park Hotel, Sheraton Center Hotel, and she has also served in various capacities in the board of the Hotel and Restaurant Association of the Philippines, or HRAP. She is also often invited to guest in TV talk shows and regularly invited as culinary judge and lecturer speaker. She is the organizer and chair of the National Food Showdown, the only nationwide culinary competition in the Philippines that aims to elevate the skills of chefs and students in the hospitality trade all over the Philippines. She was also the chairman or chairwoman of the Chefs on Parade of the HRAP. She is also a founding member of the International Wine and Food Society of the Manila Ladies Branch. Chef Myrna's work has led her to become the editor-in-chief of a culinary monthly magazine called Foodie. She was also host of 2 cooking shows, Chef TV, the food show, and Foodie Cooking Show, and host of an international culinary travel show entitled Fork in the Road on ABS-CBN's Lifestyle Network. She has 2 books to her name, The Party Cookbook, and her second book, Philippine Cuisine, Home-Cooked Recipes Wherever You May Be. Chef Myrna is also one of the 6 participating chef authors of Culinaria, A Guide to Philippine Cooking, a bestseller book manual supported by the Philippine Department of Tourism that aims to promote Filipino cuisine. Chef Myrna is also a vice president of the Food Writers Association of the Philippines, which counts among its important undertakings the annual Doreen Fernandez Food Writing Competition, a nationwide contest which she founded. Chef Myrna also advocates the preservation of traditional Filipino cooking and has spread the flavors of our cuisine through yearly food festivals, seminars, lectures, and cooking demonstrations in the Philippines and abroad, as well as through her research, her writings, and her support of organizations that have the same goal. Chef Myrna constantly experiments with ways to improve preparation techniques and presentation so that Filipino cuisine can gain the international attention it deserves. As a resource person of the Culinaria program of the Department of Tourism, Chef Myrna travels to many remote areas of the Philippines, conducting seminars and hands-on trainings to the grassroots levels on proper food preparation and handling as part of her culinary advocacy. Chef Myrna has held Filipino food festivals for the Department of Tourism and conducted lectures and cooking demonstrations for the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Trade in Hong Kong, Singapore, China, Korea, Japan, India, Israel, the UK, Belgium, Amsterdam, Germany, Spain, France, Portugal, Canada, and Australia. And she is part of the Philippine Airlines Pinoy Chef Brigade program, which aims to promote Philippine cuisine in the airline's international flights. Chef Myrna is very busy. This is a lifelong body of work, and we're happy to have her today, specially dedicated for the commemoration of the 160th birth anniversary of Dr. Jose P. Rizal. Chef Myrna, where are you?
Oh, Chef Myrna, please unmute.
Chef Myrna, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah,
Please unmute.
there you go. We're happy to.
Can you hear?
Yes, of course, loud and clear, Chef Myrna.
Okay, can you hear?
Yes, madam.
Okay.
Chef
So,
Myrna, I've just read your entire body of work, professional work, and we're very
Yeah, I
happy to have
know.
you here, despite your very busy schedule, very busy work, and you have a very interesting, delicious table set up there.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I want to greet everybody tuned in today. I'd like to thank Consul General Patrick Hilado, who turns out, to be somebody I have many common friends with. And I also want to thank you, Consul Ferdy, for having read a very extensive resume that actually probably reveals how old I am by now. So, as long as that resume has been, I have to admit this particular topic is something that I am touching on for the very first time. And even as I want to delve deeply into the Noli and the Fili, and what Jose Rizal body of work embodied in those two books, I'm afraid that I will be limited to talk about only the food that was represented in those two books, and then to relate that to perhaps how Jose Rizal grew up before he embarked on his career, going abroad, writing these two books, coming back home, and finally ending up as being martyred and now declared our national hero. He was born in June, the same month I was born. I think he's also a Gemini. And so maybe perhaps we have a lot of things in common, especially the fact that I was also born into a very big family. I'm from Batangas, which is a neighboring province of Laguna. And so many of our customs and traditions are perhaps very similar to each other. And so I'll start off, as you can see, we have a spread here. Of course, typical of how a table must have been during the time of Jose Rizal. And the title of our lecture today being Hapag Kainan ng Noli Me Tangere at el Filibusterismo. Pinapakita po natin dito sa inyo certain ingredients, certain wares that might have been used during that time and featured in these two novels. Now, I would like to start off with normally how we would start a meal. And this is by saying grace, the way they would have done that in a section of the novels. And so why don't we do that as well? So let us pray. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. So, ito na ho, umpisa na yung sermon natin.
So, si Jose Rizal
belonged to a family of 11, and he was the middle child, and they were all living in Calamba. Now, picture how rural life
that time. Hello, can you hear?
Yes, ma'am. Opo, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. Picture how rural life would have been living in the province. The family of Jose Rizal was quite prominent in their town, and so their homes were reflective of a middle-class family. So they were leasing land from the friars and growing, livestock and fruits and vegetables. They had a lot of fruit trees growing there, and then growing, livestock like pigs and chickens, and I guess I would imagine even goats, So imagine the food that they were partaking of during those times. Typical dishes that are to this day still being enjoyed. Food that I also grew up with. So definitely hindi mawawala dyan ang adobo, sinigang, and then because you had the Laguna de Bay and the waters around us and the mountains, that you can imagine the fruits and vegetables that grew there, and the freshwater fish that were caught in these waters. So many of these dishes and ingredients are mentioned in the Noli and Fili. But before we get to those particular dishes mentioned in the novels, I'd like to give you a picture of how Rizal and a typical day or life with his family was all about. So let's start with the meals. Breakfast, I would imagine, and I think it was also mentioned, were all about local dishes, that were often served in the morning. So you have probably sinangag, of course, dried fish was there, fruits that you picked from the trees just outside your home, coffee perhaps, because coffee grew in Batangas, the neighboring province of Laguna. I'm sure you had some cacao as well. That's why I guess the mention of the chocolate in the Noli and Fili was there, and there's a funny story about that later on that we can talk about. But imagine that the breakfast that the family of Rizal often had was rice, dried fish, coffee or hot chocolate. Maybe sometimes they have champurrado, maybe some breads as well, and fruit, And then for their daily meals, like lunch, they would eat family style, perhaps, just like all of us. You would probably have a soup, a fish dish, a meat course, and then some fruits, perhaps for dessert. And so these are fond memories of Rizal that he pined for when he was living abroad. But then again, in the absence of these local dishes and comfort food, he also got exposed to the culture of Spain, France in particular. I think he had strong affinity for French cooking. He was also based in Germany for a while, where he completed his Noli Me Tangere novel. And then he also somehow found some time even in Japan and Hong Kong. So all these experiences of having lived abroad opened Rizal's eyes to a lot of new things that he fancied as well. And so when he probably wrote the Noli and the Fili, he incorporated all these cultures and experiences in these books. And this gives you, an inkling to the realities of what Rizal experienced during those periods, living abroad, growing up in the province, in Calamba, acquiring education both here in the Philippines and abroad for his studies on in medicine. His meetings and friendships with people he encountered along the way. All these were influences that he brought with him and portrayed in the Noli and the Fili. So, for example, na-mention ko na yung obvious meals nila, the typical meals they have in the family. Imagine a big family eating together, and I experienced that myself. So, ang feeling mo palagi is whoever the cook was at that time had to prepare a whole lot of food for the entire clan. And I don't know, maybe for some reason, and I experienced that being the youngest in the family, I don't know if there's some connection somehow to, for example, that you were served certain, say, for example, a chicken dish. So you have the drumsticks, you have the wings, you have the breast parts and all that. And 11 people, even more with your parents, partaking of those portions there. And normally the choice cuts would go to the parents, and then there's a mad scramble for everything else. I would always get the wing part as well. And of course, the choice parts, the drumsticks, I never got to taste until I was much older. Okay? So, nai-imagine ko na kahit paano, when Rizal wrote the book and spoke about the tinola chapter, that maybe that's something that he might have experienced as well. And knowing, the feeling of being deprived at that time is something that was very real to him. And so maybe that's perhaps a way of his depicting what that feels like, and to be able to have that experience by somebody you obviously dislike. No? So, but that's a speculation on my part. And just trying to imagine how life was during this time. And so, going back to the foods that he grew up with, but what is Laguna food all about? There's a lot of coconut milk, there's a lot of cooking with gata and coconut in Laguna. What are the specialties of Laguna? Quesong puti.
Yeah.
The best quesong puti to this day you will find in Laguna. What else do you have there? Paete, for the wood carving. Lanzones, there was a time that lanzones could be had, the sweetest ones coming from Laguna. Mangoes, obviously, grew very well also in Laguna. I remember puto binyang, some rice cakes that were excellent would also come from Laguna. What else do we have from there? I mentioned cacao, right? Coffee also is something that was very easy to have access to. So living in Laguna alone provided Jose Rizal and his family with enough food to enjoy from their land, from perhaps the garden, and maybe the mercado that was just close by them. Food typically would be dishes like sinigang. The Tagalogs have a penchant for sour dishes, unlike the Visayas. So you have ingredients like kamyas, sampalo, alibangbang, green mangoes, santol. All these fruits and vegetables will be used in their cooking. So, alin pa ba? Basically, what I think we have to try and imagine is the fact that what they used to eat before continues to be enjoyed to this day. Maybe perhaps in different versions and techniques, but the ingredients that were being used and harvested and had at the time continue to be enjoyed by many in the country, and now even abroad. No, so that essentially we would say was what Jose Rizal was from childhood up until his mature years, and this was depicted obviously in all his writings, and particularly in these two novels. Now we will zero in on the dishes that were discussed and portrayed in the two books. And we start off not necessarily in the order of the chapters, but of food and beverages that I encountered going through the two novels. So it starts off with obviously the very famous tinola that was served to, at that point, the character of Jose Rizal was named Crisostomo Ibarra, who was welcomed home after years of living abroad by his host, Capitan Tiago, who was a Chinese businessman, by the way, whose daughter was Maria Clara, who was the object of Rizal's affection. And so imagine a banquet being hosted, a dinner, where you enter the home of your host and guests are offered cocktails. In this case, I believe the women were being offered betel nut, chew, nganga, and cigars, which really to this day I can't imagine us being offered those things, no? But as always, the setup or the setting of that particular event is reflective of what Jose Rizal saw abroad. So it was an elegant setting. You had waiters serving the guests. You had a big table, obviously, with wonderful set-piece settings. The guests, of course, enjoying chatting and chit-chat just before dinner. The frailes, being invited to the special event. And to this day, it's important to note that, the prominent families have this very close relationship with the church. And so it was always an honor to invite or to have a priest attend your parties at home. And so this was depicted in that particular dinner. And I think two characters here. It's Padre Damaso and is it Father Salvi. One was a Dominican and one was a Franciscan. So anyway, let's picture that they're seated at the table and the food, in this case, the main course being a tinola, is dished out in the continental style of service, individually plated. They were not going to eat family style. Food was being served per course. And so there was no mention of the other dishes served before the main dish, which was the tinola. And again, going back to my story about, the certain parts of the chicken being apportioned for everyone, by nature of either intentional, that it was intentional that it be served to Padre Damaso, that he gets a neck and a chicken wing with a few pieces of calabasa, while everybody else had the choice cuts of the drumsticks and the breasts. And Jose Rizal, of course, being the honoree, got the choicest cuts. He even got the giblets and the livers, I understand, in that particular chapter. And Padre Damaso, who is supposedly a revered individual and character in the novel, really just showed his true colors. I mean, somebody who's supposed to be a man of urbanidad, as they would say, would behave so badly and showed his true colors. When upon seeing the portion that's served to him, he didn't hide his distaste for the food that was served. Na-insulto siya. And so rather than, as they would say, a more educated person would just keep to himself and not not express, his disgust or distaste. This man made it very obvious that by, trying his soup and going through, perhaps making faces at that point, mashing the food because he wasn't really pleased with what it had, and then just pushing away the plate from him was definitely, if you were going to ask me, did not show much urbanidad. So I guess that's something that Jose Rizal wanted to depict by way of, table manners and being very impolite in his in the way he carried himself. So that's one chapter. That's the Tinola. Okay, that's the big Tinola story. Now, I wonder. I'm just saying. It mentioned in that particular version of the translation of the Noli that the Tinola had kalabasa, but there I suppose have many versions of the way Tinola is cooked, because commonly it is the green papaya right here that I have that is used, or an upo, or sometimes even on present day they even add some malunggay leaves to the tinola. But the book depicts the tinola to have kalabasa, although some other versions mention upo or papaya. But in this case here, that version mentions kalabasa as the vegetable that was added. So the next, what's another food item mentioned in the novels is, if we were talking about lavish meals at that time, Rizal also touched on the menu or the food of the poor, which is depicted in Sisa, who had her two sons, Basilio and Crispin, and this is another chapter, who worked in the convent on weekdays and would come home on weekends to their home. And Sisa preparing the food for her children, as opposed to the elegance of that menu and party of Don Tiago. Sisa prepared a very simple dish of the whitest rice that you can find. Rice as fluffy and white is something very special to us, meaning to say it is of good quality. And so this is the best that Sisa can muster for her children. She had a few pieces of fish. She went over to a neighbor, Kapitan, no, not Kapitan Tiago, but Piloso Contaccio, as they called him. She begged him to share a portion of his baboy rabo and I guess some duck legs. And then she picked the freshest vegetables from her little garden. And that was sufficient for her to prepare for the homecoming of her children. That alone was something that she felt was already a feast fit for a king. And can you imagine na tutuusin, tuyo at kanin at siguro dinurog na kamatis or whatever is something that that's all that she could afford. But then again, lovingly prepared and looking forward to her children's homecoming, this meal was definitely going to be very special. Unfortunately, her husband, who was not exactly the most ideal of spouses, he was wants to gambling in the cockpits and all that, probably always drinking and coming home drunk and all, comes home and eats all that food, leaving behind very little for the children. So I guess Rizal was also trying to portray what family life was for many Filipinos at that time, particularly those who were not as well off and not coming from prominent families. So another story pertaining to food in the Noli, as this is a favorite, is the story on the chocolate egg and chocolate a. Now they say again, I think the story in this case is a friar. I forget the name of the friar at this point. But the guests would talk about you know how important you are when you are a guest of this priest by the thickness of the chocolate that is served to you by his servant. If he signals to his servants, prepare chocolate, espeso in this case, is a thick chocolate, then that means you are an important and favored guest. But if he whispers to his or even shouts to his servant, let's prepare chocolate aguada in this case, it means it is watered down chocolate. So you would know how you stand before your host when he serves you a thick or a thin chocolate. And that's one of the more popular sections of the book. And I would imagine that Rizal, had a strong liking for chocolate because it was mentioned a whole lot in many sections of the book that chocolate and perhaps a pastry would be taken as a merienda, in the morning or in the afternoon, and that the fact that chocolate perhaps growing in their area was very good, that he definitely had to include this in his novel. So a little later on, if we have time, I can show you, the typical pastries that will go with the chocolate, and how they would serve it with the patirol, which is the I guess the version of the wire whisk that we have now, because then they have to incorporate air into the chocolate in order to thicken it.
Yeah.
So we have some samples of that here that we will show you later on. But let me proceed to discuss the other food aspects discussed in the novel. There was a chapter that discussed picnic by the river. Okay, so mentioning to you what Rizal must have grown up during the time living in Calamba, many fish dishes are mentioned in this particular chapter. So most of them are freshwater dishes. So you have biya, gobi, ayungin, which my mother liked very much. There was dalag, ano pa ba meron sa kanila? Banak, which is again a fish that was very rich in eggs. So many ways to cook that would possibly be sinigang, escabeche, pesa, fried, maybe even paksiw for that matter. And these dishes are depicted in that particular chapter where there is a picnic held by the river, and where Rizal, who apparently was a ladies' man, would entertain his friends, his lady friends, his relatives with a picnic, complete with musicians accompanying them, servants preparing the food. What else? Showing off perhaps what the wealth of the land where they resided had to offer, and the freshness of the food, and particularly the seafood that could be had by the riverside. So that was mentioned also in the two novels. Another one would be fiesta. Okay, this is something I can personally attest to. Perhaps which is something that might have been the scene during those times as depicted in the book. In Lipa, when we used to have fiestas, we would have the farm hands come down to slaughter the pig, to prepare all kinds of dishes, all the raw dishes, adobado, estofado, mechado, the afritadas, the lechons, and all that. And then it was a whole day affair. In fact, maybe even 2 days, because the eve of the fiesta is also when the fiesta actually begins. So a lot of the activities you can imagine would be the kasamas preparing the food, the servants, bringing the big bandejados of roasts, of imported ingredients like the quesos and the jamons, and then the dishes that would be cooked by the farm hands, and the visitors who would come to visit you all day long. The fiestas in Lipa, in particular, would be all-day affairs. So people don't come only for lunch or dinner, they came the whole day. And so I can imagine that this must be somehow a similar scenery of what happened in that chapter depicted in the Noli. Other food aspects or traditions mentioned were the children, for example, of these Filipinos who would be invited to these big banquets would be required to, more or less learn, the refinements of fine dining, of establishing or learning, the manners or etiquette required of them, which were practices that were obviously experienced by Jose Rizal when he was living abroad. And so, the children, you can imagine, learning and watching their teachers perhaps, or the professors, or even their parents, hovering over them like eagles to see whether they would do the right things. I mean, do you know the right spoon and fork and how to use it for whatever courses? The glasswares that were available in the setting, what was for red wine, white wine, champagne, which side do I pick up, my spoon and fork, and all that sort of stuff. I can imagine is also something that the book, the Noli and the Fili, depicted during the chapters for banquets. Okay, and what else have we been covering here? The dishes, for example, some perhaps have some meaning that Rizal was referring to in terms of how he felt about certain situations that presented themselves to him, especially when he came back after his having lived abroad, and then seeing the changes that came to be when he came home from the time he was away. I think he was away for like 6 or 7 years, and so we saw many changes in his province as well as in Manila when he started to reside there, and meeting all these personalities that he encountered along the way definitely had a very strong impact on how he started to think, as opposed to how he was growing up as a simple provinciano from Calamba. So moving forward, he lived in Manila again, perhaps speaking about a lot of his experiences in those two books up until his exile in Dapitan. And all this time, having lived away from Binyan, abroad as well as in exile, that he would continue to miss all the comfort food that he grew up with. Pretty much like I, having lived abroad for quite some time, and I'm sure quite a lot of you living overseas, and like in Guam, although I understand in Guam there are a lot of Filipino dishes that that have been embraced by Guam, and so you sort of miss all these things. So even as you are away, and he would write letters to his family, he would ask for very simple ingredients to be sent to him, because wherever he was, maybe perhaps his ingredients were not there. You have to remember that during that time in Dapitan probably didn't have very many resources as far as the food aspects were concerned. And so he constantly wrote home asking for provisions to be sent to him because he missed all this food. So, if we were to somehow summarize, what the culinary or gastronomic aspects of what these two books have portrayed is I am not in a position to talk about putting meaning or giving meaning to many dishes and what it represents in relation to his protests or his distaste for the way things were during that time. But just suffice it to say that these two books are very close to home because it speaks of our food, it speaks of our culture, it speaks of what Rizal felt back then up to present day that we continue to feel in the cuisines and in the aspects of food and dishes that we continue to enjoy to this very day. So I think I don't know how much time I have left, but I know I'm only given 30 minutes to talk. So I wanted to show you some of what we have on the table here. We have the chocolate that would have the batirols that would be used in making the traditional thick chocolates. We have there, like I showed you, is the tinola. I hope I can give you a closer look of the tinola that must have been served to Padre Damaso at that time. We have some of the wonderful summer fruits and vegetables that are available, or surely were available during that time when Rizal was growing up in Calamba. We have some atis today. Somebody was saying earlier on, my, that's a very big pineapple you have over there. We have some santol. Luckily that we are speaking to you now in the summer where the fruits and vegetables are aplenty. And so back in 1800s to present day, we all continue to enjoy these ingredients in our food and in our dishes. We have tamyas, which I picked from the tree behind my house. We have some fresh sampalok, which could be used for the sinigang. We have the green papaya that could be a substitute for the calabasa in making the tinola. We have, what else do we have here? We have the local pastries that they say they would normally have together with the chocolate. We have galletas. We have the otak from Cebu. We have the bizcocho. And here is a tablea of hot chocolate. of the chocolate that that we are showing you here, which makes the chocolate and like I said, we either watered down or very thick. In our province, we like to have our chocolate pure, but I'm surprised to discover that in other provinces like Pampanga, that they like to add ground peanuts to their hot chocolate. But coming from the region where Jose Rizal was born, we like to have our hot chocolate thick and pure. So on that note, I guess we can proceed to answer some questions that the audience might wish um, to ask us, and hopefully that we can answer. I would have wanted to delve deeper and give more meaning to, you know, what was behind the the calabasa or the chicken wing or being served you know the chocolate and egg. But I think we touched on that a little earlier on. So on that note, to speak about these two novels in 30 minutes is indeed a very big challenge. And so I simply scratched the surface, and at the end of the day, we really just spoke about you know, the typical dishes and the ingredients that were depicted in the two novels. And then before that, we spoke about what we thought Jose Rizal enjoyed as Pepe, as Jose, you know, from his childhood all the way to his mature years. So I think that's pretty much a lot of what I can say given the time limitations. And so I'm happy to answer or discuss whatever inquiries or questions or clarifications the audience may have.
Chef Myrna, thank you very much for inviting us to your kitchen. Ano? We're commemorating the birthday of Jose Rizal, pero parang naghanda ka ng pang-birthday ni Jose Rizal sa bahay mo. Ang dami mo. So, ang ganda rin ang timing natin, ma'am, kasi maghahapunan na sa Guam at malapit na rin maghapunan sa Pilipinas, and we're talking about food. Timing is very good. So, I think based on your discussion for earlier, there were many food mentions in Noli and El Fili presented by the characters or other characters during moments of danger, during moments of celebration, or during moments of sorrow. So Noli and Fili is really, what we're doing now is just really scratching the surface. It has a lot of colors, a lot of flavors, political, literary, culinary flavors, and our intention really is to invite the global Filipinos to revisit Noli and Fili now, especially now, we're commemorating the birthday of Jose Rizal, and thank you for giving us your insights and giving context to the food mentions in Noli and Fili. Ma'am, tanong ko na kagad, yung mga tanong tayo from the audience. Ito napansin ko din po, sa Noli and Fili, there was no mention of adobo. Walang banggit ng adobo. Sa lahat na nabanggit na pagkain, yung paborito ko din ng wala, ang adobo. Why do you think there is no mention of adobo? Can we say na si Rizal ay hindi mahilig sa toyo at suka? O ayaw niya ng chicken?
Hindi. You know, ako rin, I sort of wondered about that in the beginning. But I was really thinking along the lines of his plot of depicting what better dish to portray, you know, to reveal the personality or the, you know, the negativeness of what Padre Damaso represented. If we were to serve the adobo as the main dish, I can imagine medyo mahirap i-depict yung distaste of Padre Damaso at seeing what is served to him. If that were merely again a chicken neck and pork, perhaps. First of all, I think at that point, the adobo would not have been a very special dish to serve to somebody coming home from a homecoming. Because they have to remember that when Rizal was living abroad, he continued to enjoy these dishes, like the sinigangs, the adobos, the typical comfort food that you eat on a daily basis.
That's right.
So I guess on his part, when he wrote about the tinola, this was a dish that he probably yearned for while living abroad. You know, the warmth of soup, the comfort of native chicken being used. Di ba merong mga kwento na yung mga natatalo ng mga manok from the cockfights, meron silang sinasabi na tinali, tinalo, tinola. Okay? So in this case here, I would imagine that maybe this was a dish that, again, Rizal may have been pining for while he was living abroad, and that the warmth and hot broth that you would savor coming home is really something that even I, having lived abroad, when I come home, I look for dishes that I don't normally often am able to have while I was living abroad. And I think tinola, in the absence of perhaps during that time where they would cook, you know, the native chicken. Native chickens may perhaps the free-range chickens, as they would call them, were probably even harder to come by overseas. But then again, I'm really just speculating here. But again, it could have been an adobo, as far as I'm asking. It could also have been a sinigang, for that matter, if you're going to talk about sourness, you know, seeing perhaps depicting Padre Damaso, you know, wincing at the sourness of the sinigang. That could have been something that Rizal could also have chosen to depict in that chapter. But I wouldn't go any further and delve into why tinola, no, and not adobo, because then again it could be something, you know, it really could be any dish for that matter. I would be speculating, and everybody else can be doing that. We can put meaning into anything in this case here. But on my part, like I said, I cannot dwell any deeper than what my personal experience was as a child, also growing up in a large family and being left with the lesser parts because naagawan ako ng mga kapatid ko. So I guess Jose Rizal wanted Padre Damaso to feel that as well. Okay, that you are nothing, you are small, and you deserve that.
Okay. Chef, we have a very interesting question. It's coming from Dr. Sam Mabini Young, a postdoctoral research fellow from the University of Alabama with North Carolina State University and ECMC Foundation, who is currently in Guam now. And her question is quite interesting. What do you think, though, Dr. Jose Rizal would say about today's quick fixings for traditional dishes like sinigang mix or escabeche mix or tinola mix, all of these things, the quick fix, because now we're all very busy with our work, with our lives. We might not have the same time to gather all the natural ingredients, cook a fantastic tinola without the added, pack flavor in a pack, and just put in the water, cook, and everything is ready. What do you think Rizal would say about today's quick fix?
Okay. Obviously, growing up in that era was really more about slow food, slow cooking, no? So Jose Rizal and everybody else did not know any better about these conveniences, as they say. I would think that for as long as you are able to replicate, the qualities and flavors that these instant mixes, as they say, provide, many who are, who are more attuned to using these ingredients now. I don't see how Jose Rizal, if he were living to this day, obviously would have grown and altogether become a man of the times as well. So I don't think he would be averse to that, as long as it did not take away all the wonderful qualities and flavors and elements in that particular of that particular ingredient, because it's really the flavors that you grew up with, the flavors that you learn to love, that stays with you. And for as long as these ingredients can provide you the same comfort and qualities, which I must say some of these convenience foods have provided quite a bit of that. I don't think he'll be that much of a purist either.
Correct. Chef Myrna, I think mas mapagpatawad si Rizal sa sinigang mix kaysa sa mga fraile. So, mapatawad na siguro ang sinigang. Pero I don't think meron tinola mix at this time eh. Diba? I don't think there's a tinola mix yet. But thank you for answering the question of Dr. Sam Mabini Yang. We have a next question. And since wala pong adobo in the Noli and El Fili, do you think the recipes or food dishes, the dishes mentioned in Noli and Fili, have been embraced or celebrated by the Filipino communities around the world, by the global Filipinos, as much as they have celebrated adobo? Like escabeche, tinola, relleno, sinigang, do these dishes share the same level of acceptance and celebration as adobo? They're all my favorite.
Yes, I mean, it's very timely that you talk about present-day exposure of Filipino dishes overseas. I'm very happy to note that we are gaining a lot of ground in terms of these younger chefs living abroad or having had the benefit of a culinary education and perhaps better exposure, that there is now a higher appreciation for Philippine cooking, and that they are somehow contributing to, at the same time, learning as well what Philippine cuisine has to offer to the global platform. So, okay, let me say this further. I think we have to stop thinking and saying and asking how we can ever make it out there. I think we shouldn't be too concerned about being recognized and being praised for what we have to offer. Because then again, maybe it's this Indio mentality of ours again, seeking approval from the higher ups each time. I don't feel that we have to, walk on our heads or roll on our bellies just to call attention to what we have, or to prove to everybody that our food is excellent. Because then it is food that we grew up with. It is something that we enjoy. And unless we're a different animal altogether, our food is very palatable. Having lived abroad and serving the usual dishes that have been mentioned to our foreign guests, I don't see any problem that we even have to turn to fusion techniques or molecular gastronomy, or to alter the way our food has been cooked for the longest time, for it to achieve approval or at least an appreciation for. Lagi na lang tayong nagtatanong paano kaya tayo mapapansin? How can we elevate our cuisine, blah, blah, blah. I think we simply just have to keep talking and keep cooking it, because then, very classic examples I've been reading that in Guam alone, many of our Filipino dishes are, have been embraced by the locals in Guam. And, in fact, a lot of the dishes and even named as they are, as we eat them and know them here in the Philippines. So I don't think we have a problem there, especially now that we are gaining ground. Thank God, finally, that our own people are appreciating our cuisine. Notice that the question shouldn't be posed to the non-Filipinos who we wish to win over to us. But the fact that it is the Filipinos themselves, especially the young now, and hopefully even the older and present generation, that they show the world just how much they appreciate their culture and their cuisine in particular. And that's enough to sell us to the whole world.
Correct. Salamat, Chef. Actually, Filipino food naman does not have to be very popular to be very good. It is good as it is. So it might not be popular to other people,
yes,
but we eat it nonetheless. So tama po kayo. We cook it, and cook it. If people like it, good. If they like it too much, they can bring it home. But we
no, and also you have to remember the lesson of today's taste buds has changed. People are more adventurous now. People are more curious to learn about exotic flavors and new ingredients. Patis is being used a lot in French cooking, in replacement of salt. Vinegar, when I was in Europe 2 or 3 years ago, was an ingredient that they discovered could be a wonderful addition to their cooking. And so I think if we also focus on the local ingredients that we have been using and the common ingredients that we use in our cooking as a way to promote our cuisine overseas, and then so I think we're on the right track there.
Opo, Chef Myrna, mabanggit ko lang there was a mention of tortang alimango in the works of Rizal, and we're very surprised. In Guam, you can buy it frozen, tortang alimango, and we actually tried it here in the consulate. It was actually very good. Very surprised.
Great.
Tortang alimango.
And so, I'm sorry?
Tortang alimango.
Yes, I was also reading very briefly about the popular dishes there in Guam in particular, that you have a dish called Kelanguen, which sounds like Kelanguen, and of which the recipe and cooking and preparation method is very similar to our kinilaw.
Yes.
Except that we use limes or lemons or citrus fruits instead to cook the Kelanguen as opposed to vinegar here in the Philippines. I heard bistec is also quite popular there.
Yeah.
Bistec, by the way, was also in my readings are one of the dishes that are Rizal's favorites. No?
Yes. Chef, dito sa Guam, very popular pansit, kare-kare, dinuguan, sinigang, and tinola. So we're showing the world, the universe, that Filipino cuisine is meant to be shared. By the way, Chef Myrna, I have one more question. This is a follow-up question from Dr. Sam Mabiniang. And her question is, Chef, can you speak about the prevalence of rice or kanin on today's typical Filipino plates, which Sam did not recall being mentioned or having seen on your table? There seems to be some prevalence of rice on today's typical Filipino plates. I don't think it's wrong, but it's really part of the package.
Oh yes. Well, I mentioned earlier that Jose Rizal grew up on a diet of rice, of sinangag in the morning, and obviously during lunch and dinner, as most Filipinos are used to and accustomed to having rice as part of their meal, no? Rice as opposed to bread, although I understand that even Rizal had both rice and bread in all his meals. But particularly on present day, dati kasi, how many varieties of rice did we have back then? Very little, no? But right now, I mean, they're all colors and sources for the rice that's grown upland or in the lowlands. May violet rice, may brown rice, may black rice, mga piruluto, mga dilorado, all these fragrant white grains of rice that we are now enjoying here back home. I don't know if during the time of Jose Rizal, if they were growing all these varieties of rice, but also suffice it to say that Asia is a rice-eating continent.
Yes.
And so I'm sorry that I don't have a representation of rice here on my table, but maybe perhaps I can imagine that when the main course of the tinola must have been served to Padre Dama, so that there must have been a siding of rice somewhere down the line, and that also was not mentioned in the novel.
Correct, Chef. At saka, I could not imagine eating sinigang or tinola with bread. It must be with rice all the time. Not right.
Yes, yes, that's true. And so maybe perhaps Rizal, while living abroad, must have, been missing plain white rice. Because I remember even when traveling in Spain, and paella was coming out of our ears the whole time we were going around. But almost at the end of the tour, we had requested our tour leader, can we have just plain white rice? Because we want to appreciate the viands that were being served to us with plain white rice as the, as perhaps what is bread to you would be rice to us.
Correct po. Ma'am, meron tayong isang question from NCCA, from Suzanne Paramil. Sabi niya, it has been a tradition in the family to cook tinola with green papaya that allows more taste to the ginger. But where did the idea of adding dahong sili to the dish? Is it for additional subtle taste or just a twist to add color to tinola? I think I have an answer to that, but
well, you have to remember na ang regional cooking natin depends on the indigenous ingredients that are found in their land. Because there are some tinola dishes that even add malunggay to the soup. And then when you think about it, if you go to the province of the Consul General, there is a dish that is similar, but it's called binakol, which is cooked with coconut water as the broth. Okay. And then there is, but then again, when you go to the Visayas, particularly say in Cebu, I tried a dish called tinoa or tinola, which to my surprise is completely different from the Tagalog tinola that I was accustomed to, because this was a stew of fish that was not half as, not even remotely similar to what the tinola that I grew up in the Tagalog region is all about.
Opo, ma'am, Chef, merong comment si Al Rivera dito. Sabi niya, I read in some discussions that Kelanguen was supposed to be pronounced Kelanguen, but it is something tomorrow orthography mix up. That is why it's called Kelanguen, pronounced with a G. And he also said that they put malunggay and sayote in their tinola in Pampanga.
Okay. Well, then that's good news for us, because then if we always talked about all these foreign influences coming to our land and foreign ingredients being brought to us, like the tomatoes and the spices and what have you, landing in the Philippines, then it's nice to know that the other way around, that we have actually brought our culture to another land. I have had some readings before, and I don't know if you can attest to that, that we even brought the art of making lambadog to Mexico, which in turn they have turned into their tequila using the agave plant. So,
Really?
pwede na tayo magyabang ngayon na hindi lang tayo itong natamaan o napadalahan ng mga kultura ng ibang bansa, but the fact that we have also brought our culture and influence to other countries. I can imagine that even now, modern day, present day, with the OFWs living overseas, that many foreigners are now getting exposed to our dishes that we cook for our employers, our
Spouses.
our families. And in your case there in Guam, many Filipinos living there have certainly brought their culture over, and it's apparent in many of the dishes that has been embraced, and even the names, for that matter, are very similar to the dishes that we all know back home in the Philippines.
Correct, Chef. Chef, we have a question all the way from Saipan. So international ang ating question and answer portion.
Nakaka-nervyos na, baka hindi ko na masagot yung mga yan.
Madali lang ito. Ang sabi lang niya, do we have any influence sa Spanish cuisine, Philippines on Spanish cuisine?
Do we have any influence on Spanish cuisine?
Being
not that I can think of right now. But I can imagine, but ito yung sasabihin ko. There is one dish perhaps that the Spanish definitely did not influence us in. And that would be the kilawin, the kinilaw. Which, by the way, I'd like to correct my own definition of kinilaw is that which is cooked in liquid fire, in this case an acid, a vinegar or a citrus, that the kilawin is actually cooked over hot, over fire. But in your case, you call it kilawin, or kilawin in Guam, is again, I suppose even here in the Philippines, people refer interchangeably to the term kilawin and kinilaw, referring to the raw fish that is cooked in acid. But in your case there that I read, that chicken obviously has to be cooked all the way through before it is turned into the kilawin that you speak about in Guam.
Correct, ma'am. I think ang ating influence naman sa Italian cuisine, napatamis natin ang spaghetti nila through Jollibee.
Oh. That's true. That's true.
Philippine style, ang tamis-tamis.
Well, banana ketchup is something that's gaining ground overseas. That's a very Filipino invention. And so, like I said, again, the tastes, everybody's taste is developing and being exposed to many new flavors. And so everyone is more experimental and adventurous. So I would imagine that this is a good time for Philippine cuisine to be sold as is and to be appreciated for the traditional and how do you call this, original recipes that we have been enjoying for the longest time. I've got nothing against molecular gastronomy or all these fusion dishes that are, a big hit, especially with the younger Filipino chefs, no? But just a word of advice and caution to them that they must start with the basics and make sure that before they make an adobo, ice cream or foam or whatever, that they start out with the basic recipes and understand what the classic adobo recipe is all about. As in all the other dishes, that we that we continue to enjoy, and hopefully are able to share with the children, particularly of this generation, especially for parents who are too busy working, although these days obviously many are working from home. Let's take that opportunity to go back to basics and to go back to the kitchen and learn to cook our food and to serve it and to teach it to our children, so that the coming generations and the future generations will continue to enjoy the food that we that we grew up with. Because then if we stop serving them this food, all they're gonna know are all these instant mixes and fast food that they're exposed to these days. And I would understand, and although I understand the difficulties of the present situation of the pandemic and all that, but I would always take a more positive look at the situation of us, most of us being homebound, that it is perhaps also time for us to, to go back to our kitchen and to our basics. And this is something that I'm certain that Jose Rizal is going to be very happy to learn, that we have embraced our culture and that we are proud of it, and that even our children, as they become the future of the land, will continue to embrace the traditions of particularly our gastronomy and our history and culture.
Okay, Chef, thank you very much. Chef, meron lang babanggitin ako mga comments dito sa ating chat box. Very interesting. Sabi ni isang ating participant na Filipinos daw were eating adobo before the Spaniards came. And
yes,
squid cooked in its own ink was brought by Spaniards to Spain when they saw it being cooked in the Philippines.
Yes. Again, all this is based on historical data, hopefully not speculations, but I tend to believe perhaps that adobo was a name given to a dish by the Spanish when they saw a local dish cooked in a manner that was similar to their adobo. So I think in this case here, they must have pointed to that particular dish, which was likened to a Spanish dish called adobo on their part. But I can believe that we must have been cooking the adobo for the longest time, because kinilaw, which is a vinegar-based dish, is a dish that was existing, even during prehistoric times. And so the presence of vinegar in our diet and in our cooking, and of course in adobo, I tend to believe that vinegar cookery was a very important cooking technique in the Philippines, and particularly in my province. Puro suka ang pagkain namin, ha? We like to cook a lot with vinegar in our province. And I'm proud to say that if we were to describe what unique ingredient could portray many dishes in Philippine cookery, not present in the cooking of many other countries, it would be cooking with vinegar.
Correct. Thank you, Chef Myrna. So before I give our final question, I think we have a lot of chefs who have joined our discussion today, like Chef Ian Ebron from the University of the Philippines. So marami din siya mga comments about adobo, and unfortunately we don't have a lot, the whole day, the whole night to talk about adobo, although it's not mentioned in the Noli and El Fili. Chef, my last question. We studied Noli and El Fili in high school, correct? And in our study and analysis of these two literary works of Rizal, why do you think there seems to be less attention or interest to focus on these gastronomic references in our study of Noli and El Fili? I mean, you mentioned that these food items or dishes were served during moments of sorrow, celebration, and challenges. So why do you think there's less attention given to these things?
Then or now?
During our time, ma'am, when we were studying Noli and Fili.
Ah, okay. Well, I would liken that to the question that was being posed quite often is, we didn't think much of our food back then and up until now. So the two novels were really focused more on the on the revolution and the unrest, you know, of the period. And so to focus quite a lot on food at the time, obviously most of these dishes that were served, we're giving it meaning now. Maybe perhaps back then, the focus was really more on the story of the you know, the uprising and the unrest. That so much, and food was really something that Rizal mentioned more or less to depict the realities of his being as Crisostomo Ibarra, that he was a Filipino that he portrayed in this particular novel. So yung touches on the customs and traditions and the sceneries of the rural scenes are really recollections of his life in the provinces and in Calamba in particular. So I would imagine that even now as we speak about this, ngayon lang ninyo naisip ito, pag-usapan natin ang you know, what the mention of these foods actually are depicting in the story. But at least during my time, when we were studying the Noli and Fili, and this was in high schools, really only two chapters talking about food stayed with me. And this was the tinola as an affront to Padre Damaso, you know, and the chocolate and chocolate which was quite humorous in the story. And so as far as I'm concerned, it's not because we didn't really pay much attention to it at the time, but because the relevance of what we're feeling now as far as our cuisine is concerned is really only coming to life now.
That is correct, Chef. Chef, ang daming good vibes comments dito sa ating chat box. Nagpapasalamat for your insights and your context about the works of Noli.
Feeling ko na professor ka na nagtatanong ng mga sagot na kailangan kong sagutin, recitation.
Maraming gusto magpaampon sa inyo dito, Chef Myrna. Mukhang tatawagin ka ng Tita Myrna. Maraming gusto magpaampon sa iyo dito sa chat box eh. Maraming
what?
Gusto magpaampon sa iyo.
Maraming gusto magpaampon.
We would like to call you Tita Myrna na, not Chef Myrna.
Buti naman, tita. Pwede na rin ate. Pero naman lola.
Chef, this has been a wonderful, casual, fun discussion about the work and life of Rizal. May we request a short final message from you about our topic for today?
Okay. Well, as you can see, my career has really revolved around initially cuisine, taking up a course in UP. I'm a UP graduate as well of hotel and restaurant administration, which my father looked down on because he was a doctor. He said, ay, mag-aaral ka para lang maging tarihan administrator yung tawag niya. No? But then again, over the years, I began to realize and appreciate what my work was all about. And just like, of course, I'm not as heroic as Sir Rizal, but I did experience growing up almost in the same manner that he did, similar to because we were both somehow from the same region. Having lived abroad and getting exposed to the finer things in life, coming back home and bringing home all these experiences that I enjoyed and obviously was able to put to good use during my work. But then there came a point in my life where I was somehow thrown into working with Philippine cuisine by the nature of my work in corporate dining. And then I began to appreciate and really took it upon myself to take promoting Philippine cuisine as a mission because somebody has to do it. And I'm glad that even as I may have some reservations about how the younger chefs are being too, shall we say, aggressive in altering the states, altered states of some of our comfort dishes and our traditional dishes. Still, they're working with Philippine cuisine. And like I say, parang sirang plaka lagi, don't stray too far away from home, lest you lose your identity as a Filipino and either become Filipino-Italian or Australian Filipino or Japanese Filipino and ang mangyayari dyan is we will lose our culture altogether. There's nothing wrong with appreciating adobo as classic as it is, tinola the way it's cooked, the sinigang the way your parents would cook it. Hopefully that they're still cooking for you. But that's very important. I'd like to say that with all the foreign books that I've read as well, there is one line in one book that's very important and has stayed on with me. And this is by a brilliant writer, Briyat Safran, Anselm Briyat Safran, and he says, "Tell me what you eat, and I will tell you who you are." And on that note, I hope that the younger students or the cooking aficionados or the hobbyists around take that message with them. Melting pot na nga tayo eh. Are we going to lose our identity even in our cooking?
Thank you, Chef Myrna. Those are very delicious words. And you are our new Tita Myrna. And dami in the chat box for this one.
Hindi ko alam kung matutuwa ako doon o maiinsulto para ni Padre Damaso.
Hindi naman, ma'am. These are words of endearment naman. And thank you for inviting us to your kitchen. Thank you for joining us in our celebration of Jose Rizal's birthday. And we're happy to have you. And thank you for this delicious discussion. Our participants are very happy. It's popping up so much.
Thank you. I was really afraid that I cannot talk too kumbaga too intelligently about how deep the messages are of the Noli and Fili. But hopefully this is a start, and you got me interested into delving more into understanding the stories behind and the meanings behind Jose Rizal's depiction of the various dishes in his two books.
Opo. Ma'am, meron lang tayong mga admin announcements. So we will have a feedback form for our participants and we will be sending them by email. We also invite everyone to follow us at PH in Agana on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and on the web, and for our website for our upcoming activities. And we're also celebrating this year the 75th anniversary of Philippine-U.S. diplomatic relations. So we have a program until July 4, 2021, featuring 75 memorable recollections of people-to-people ties between the Philippines and the U.S. in commemoration of our 75th anniversary. Food included, memories of food included. So again, on behalf of the Consul General, might want to say something, sir?
Maraming pong salamat ulit, Chef Myrna. It's been a very interesting discussion. And I think a lot of our audience today appreciate all the learnings and insights we had. So marami pong salamat ulit.
Yes, maraming salamat din, Consul General. I hope to visit Guam one of these days.
Yes, we look forward to hosting you here in Guam.
Yes, and eating Filipino food, Guam style.
Chef Myrna, Conjen Patrick from Sentro Rizal Agana, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day. Stay safe and enjoy your dinner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Salamat po.
Salamat po din.